So welcome to our best practice series, and as Catholic Schools Guide, we are so excited to bring you this series. We often look to how we can add value to our Catholic schools in Australia, and we felt certainly best practice is very much in alignment with what we are trying to achieve at Catholic Schools Guide, and certainly with all of the Catholic schools that we have the opportunity to work with. So thank you for being here. We know your time is valuable today, and we look forward to providing an exceptional session that's going to benefit your school. So today's topic is navigating the teacher shortage, certainly something that is a hot topic in the press at the moment. We have two knowledgeable experts from Schoolhouse, and Schoolhouse has a commitment to Catholic education, and they understand that finding the right talent is pivotal to any school's success. So they are a Catholic Schools Guide partner, and we know that today they have some brilliant wisdom to share. But before I introduce our key speakers, I would like to, I'm sure that Greg Campitelli, who is the director of Catholic Schools Guide and publisher, would actually like to welcome you himself. He's actually the reason that we are here today, and we look forward to just hearing a very quick bite from Greg.
Thank you very much, Margaret. And I'm very delighted that you've used a very flattering photo of me. Thank you very much on the screen. Welcome, everybody. Thrilled to be joined by absolute terrific partners of Catholic Schools Guide. Schoolhouse is going to be joined by Ryan and Tyson today. They're tremendous supporters of what we do as a publication, as an industry, and a celebration of Catholic education. Catholic Schools Guide started in 2010, and predominantly it was historically focused in three large cities: Melbourne, Brisbane, and Sydney. Over the last, really through the course of the pandemic, we looked at our internal strategies and said, look, we've got to be Australia-wide. And so we put a lot of effort into developing a website and making sure that every single Catholic school in Australia, primary and secondary, is listed on our site for free. And right now, that's exactly the case. Our website celebrates every single Catholic school. So we've got to be out there telling our story. Education is more competitive than it's ever been, and get out there and tell our story to actually not just a local audience or a state audience, but to a national audience and an international audience, because what we're seeing is this phenomenal shift in the way people are accessing education and a more mobile population and the way we work. This is changing forever. There's been a paradigm shift, and I'm sure the boys will talk to you more about that. And we've got a special offer on the table, Margaret, for every single Catholic school in Australia to increase their presence on the Catholic Schools Guide website, which is just an absolute no-brainer. It's an absolute Monty. Everyone's going to love what we're going to have to offer. But today it's about recruiting the right staff and getting those people. And we've all been privy to the National Cabinet meetings that have just been on in the last week about this very issue. And I'm going to hand back to you, Margaret, to introduce our expert speakers today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Greg. So today we have two education recruitment specialists with us. So Tyson Wood brings a high level of experience in working with Australian schools in the hiring of teachers and leaders. An education recruitment leader since 2003, he's been a guest speaker at state and national events covering topics related to teacher and school leadership recruitment. He joined Schoolhouse only earlier this month, and so we're the lucky ones. We get to be one of the first groups to hear from him, and he's one of our New South Wales and ACT recruitment consultants. Ryan McKenzie, he's completed a Bachelor of Exercise Science and a postgrad Diploma of Education before moving into teaching in 2012, working in schools in Australia, England and Spain. Now, upon his return to Australia in 2017, he accepted a position in education recruitment rather than going back to teaching. So he spent 4 years before moving in that role before moving into his current role at Schoolhouse. He prides himself on his ability to find quality educators for his client schools, and he works tirelessly to ensure their individual needs are met. He's currently working alongside the most experienced and dedicated team of education recruitment consultants in Australia, and he looks forward to building more connections with teachers and schools in 2022 and beyond. And I'm very excited now to hand over to Tyson and Ryan for this amazing little session.
Margaret. Thank you very much, Margaret, and good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute delight to be here today along with my colleague, Ryan. Thank you so much to the Catholic Schools Guide for inviting Ryan and I, and thank you to all of you for tuning in. If you wondered why Schoolhouse is presenting today, it is because we are a group of career education recruiters, while many of us, including Ryan and I, are also former teachers. We have on staff former school leaders and marketeers who specialize in education recruitment. It is through our people and their experiences that we have put together this presentation. We also know that there is a high level of experience in this room. And there may be parts of our presentation or talk that you are already familiar with. And we also know that you might have some expertise to share yourself. Whether it's comments, expertise, or questions, just put them in the chat. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A where we can answer your questions, hear your tips that will help all our collective learnings. Let's get started. First of all, we'll spend the majority of the time unpacking what we call an employee value proposition, or we'll refer to in short as an EVP. That'll take up the most time, and then we will move on to a few more tips, the top tips that all our recruitment team have put into this presentation. The employee value proposition. I started recruiting in 2003, and I remember a school principal, when I first sat down and talked about recruitment, the principal made it very clear that a school is a school is a school is just not the case. Yes, similarities exist, but there is so much diversity, and schools offer unique workplaces. And that's why we want to focus on the employee value proposition of the EVP. What is it? In short, it's about defining the essence of your school, what you're all about from a workplace perspective. As an employer, there is a continual value in putting yourself in the shoes of future employees, now more than ever. There are hundreds of teaching jobs available. If you hopped on a job board or a few job boards, you will see all the job ads focus primarily on the specifications of a job. If I'm a science teacher and I'm looking for a science teaching job and I target Melbourne, I may see a number of science teaching jobs. And if it weren't for the logo of the school, a lot of the job would sound the same because we focus on specifications. That's normal. Of course we do. We want to attract the right type of teacher, and we need to put in those specifications to do so. However, as recruiters, we build EVPs and we put them at the forefront of what we do, because the biggest magnet that helps attract people is your workforce, your working conditions, your workplace culture, everything that you're about as an employer for teachers, support staff, and even leaders. It is so magnetic. It's why we want to start this presentation and spend the most on it, as we feel if we can promote our schools like we do for students and parents, if we can promote our schools in ways to candidates, we are going to be able to navigate this teacher shortage a lot better. You're going to start to notice the word EVP. You may have already heard it, but you're going to start to notice it more and more. And you're seeing already other industries are starting to build EVPs to showcase their place of employment, present themselves as an employer of choice. So let's take a deep dive into an EVP. I'm going to hand it over to Ryan now to walk you through all the different dimensions of the EVP. And like we presented early, Ryan is a former teacher. He's got 5 years of education recruitment experience in Queensland and New South Wales. Over to you, Ryan.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Tyson. We'll just get that next slide up and run through and unpack this a little bit further. Just the next one there as well for me, Tys. Lovely. Well, it is a pleasure to be here today, and thanks again to Catholic Schools Guide for the invitation. As Tyson just sort of said, we're going to go into a bit of detail around what you could do in each of these areas, as you can see here on the screen, for your EVP. Again, as Tyson said, we understand that what I'll cover here may or may not be applicable to your specific school. It could also be that you're already doing many of the things that I'll discuss here. But again, this is all about learning. Hopefully, you can take a few points away with you that can help you with the current teacher shortage, engaging future and current staff in your community, and then help to minimize the issue of recruitment. So we're going to start down the bottom here with rewards. Now, when thinking about feedback and recognition to start with for your staff, a number of key points have been raised. Now, important to understand that everything that I discuss here today has either come directly from candidates that we work with or schools that we work with. So in relation to feedback and recognition for your staff, these are some common questions you'd like to ask yourself to see if it can help you with your EVP. First one there is just around how do you recognise and celebrate your staff? How much of this happens and who is responsible for this? How often are you communicating with your staff around recognition and feedback of their performance? Being tangible and transparent with goals and expectations for your teachers. Is it the case in your particular school? How do you utilise teacher appraisals in order to highlight these points? Things like teacher observations as well, a fantastic source of recognition and feedback. Are you implementing them at the moment? If so, who's responsible for this and can this load be shared? A lot of what we talk about in the next few moments is about reducing workload and trying to highlight the strengths of your school. So really key to think about that as well. Again, these are just a few of the many, many, many things that you could be doing or are doing in relation to feedback and recognition for your staff. And each are part of the conversations, as I said, we have regularly with candidates around what's important to them. Next, I want to touch on awards and incentives. Now, we generally find that this is more applicable to our regional and remote schools, and they're often used as a way to hook staff. Obviously, the financial side of things moving into state or potentially to a remote community might be a bit difficult. We understand that these incentives are useful in some instances, but again, teachers need to be coming into your school for intrinsic reasons, which we'll touch on shortly, and how you can sort of highlight the culture of your school shortly. But in essence, what do you do or can you offer in terms of awards and incentives for per possible staff? Things that we've seen used in the past: relocation assistance if you're in a remote or rural community, accommodation allowances, which is more important now with the rising cost of living, paid travel to and from home states in towns if you've got someone from interstate, additional travel leave days and student free days. How are those student free days used? Is it a free time for teachers to get home potentially, or is there PD included in that? Things like retention allowances. The longer you stay at a school, you get a bonus at the end of each year. Again, one of those financial things, but could be quite important if you've got the ability to do so. Things like higher super contributions, salary packaging, fee discounts for children, attendance bonuses, and staff meals. Again, these are just a few possible awards and incentives you could offer to attract and retain staff. We understand budgets are tight though, can't do all of these things, but there might be the opportunity for you to do so. Next, I want to talk about opportunities. Now, I've interviewed, as Tyson has alluded to, I've been in recruitment for quite some time now, thousands of teachers in my time. And one key thing I hear from experienced teachers when they're looking for a new role is around career progression. So first little dot point there around career progression. How many leadership roles do you have in your school? What do you do in terms of making progression transparent for things like your head of year, head of department, head of house, or even senior leadership? Are there tenure periods for each of those roles, and what are those tenure periods? What is the process for reappointment and who's involved in that process? How transparent it is to your staff. Now, this is something that we speak about so often with candidates. They've left a role or they're looking to move on from a role because they were overlooked for a position, which is totally fine, but they didn't get that tangible feedback to understand why. Now, another key point that we see, and some examples here, we often see candidates come to us that say, look, I've been teaching for X amount of years now. It's only natural for me to move into a leadership position, get a promotion and get that pay rise. But we understand, and you understand as leaders, that these people don't always display the qualities that you're going to need in those roles. So, as I alluded to, what do you do to manage these teachers? Okay, having transparency around the expectations of someone in that role is really, really helpful, we find. And when you ask someone why they're looking for leadership, you very quickly know whether they'll be good in that position or not. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have a great teacher on your hands that needs to be managed in order to retain them. So as we said, attracting is one thing, but then retaining some of those quality people who might be overlooked for leadership positions is really, really important as well. On the flip side, when I'm talking to early career teachers, one of the key questions I get asked is, what does a school offer in terms of professional development? Okay, helping them develop their craft as a teacher. So ask yourself, what is your approach to professional development? And how would you articulate this to someone in an interview if they asked? How do you link your PD opportunities to your school's strategic direction? Do you have a clear idea of what that looks like, or is it, and when is it reviewed? Is it yearly, quarterly, given the changing the changes that we're seeing in education at the moment? One of our client schools, for example, offers a master's program to support development of their staff. What they'll do is pay a permanent staff member to undertake additional study in relevant areas in exchange for a time commitment from that teacher at the school. Again, budgets are tight, we understand that, so it might not be possible, but what can you do in order to support the career progression or the professional development within your staff? Next little point there is around work, or in particular work environment. Now, Tyson mentioned this a few moments ago. Understanding the environment of a school is very difficult when you're just looking at a position description. So what is it like to be at your school in terms of things like leadership? Common question that I get asked from all types of candidates. How would you summarize the leadership of a school? And what would you do in an EVP in order to do so, either verbally at interview or then visibly on a website or potentially another document? Mentoring is another key point that we wanted to highlight here as well. Do you have mentoring programs for new staff? Is it just for graduates, or would an experienced teacher moving to your school have access to this? Now, a big part of mentoring, which also crosses over with culture and practice, are inductions. Now, what do they look like at your school? Start thinking about that induction process. Are they generic, or are they specifically tailored to the candidate that's coming in? Do they look different for staff joining mid-year, which we're seeing happen so often now, as compared to the start of the school year where things are probably a little bit easier? Who in your school is involved in and responsible for these? Can you get other staff, potentially classroom teachers, involved in that process to help with the mentoring, which many of you I'm sure already are? How long is an induction period for graduates compared to experienced new staff members? And if you've got these programs, are they known? Okay, it's really important that the work that you're doing behind the scenes to induct and mentor your staff is known at the forefront of your advertising in your EVP. Now, as it was mentioned a few moments ago, I've taught across a number of states and moved interstate a couple of times as well as overseas. And it's a really, really scary thing to do. And starting in a new role can be quite daunting. So making sure that that you're able to articulate clearly those mentoring and those transition periods is really important. As we spoke to, again, this is more of an interstate thing and an overseas teacher potentially coming home, but what do you do for those teachers who might be making those bigger moves? How are you supporting them during that transition? Next point there is just in relation to working conditions. Now, it's so interesting that I get asked this question so often, but do teachers have their own office, or do they have a desk that they can do their work at? Do they have a specialized classroom if they're a primary or a science teacher, for example? We often get asked what are your buildings and facilities like, whether it's a historical site, which many of our schools are, versus some of those more modern facilities. Those are the questions that some of our candidates like to ask, and something you can put in an EVP in order to help promote yourself. In terms of staffing centres and staff rooms, how does that space feel and function for staff? People want to know if they get into that particular school, whether they have an open space to communicate with and meet with other staff to build that relationship and that community feel within your school. Next dot point down there is just in relation to reputation. This one's difficult. It's always hard to know what the reputation of your school is in the wider community. And as Tyson alluded to a few moments ago, websites are generally very student-centered. So what does your school website, or what do you do in order to provide prospective staff some information about the reputation of your school? What do your teachers have to say about working at your school? And how can you elevate your reputation through things like testimonials from staff, parents, and students? Okay, collaboration is the final point here that we want to touch on. Now, teachers love this. We all love this, and schools strive to be doing this extremely well. But because it's one of the biggest things that teachers look for when they're looking for a new school, you need to know how to present that information verbally at interview and visibly on your website or similar. It's something that we'll discuss often with teachers when they're putting together things like a teaching statement or a cover letter. There are philosophies and ideals, obviously, about this, but you have to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. Do you speak to what your current staff can do to help future employees understand the team's culture around collaboration? Again, utilising your current staff in order to promote your school is another really important thing that some of our schools do. Finally, and most importantly, we want to touch on the culture and practice of your school and what you can include in your EVP. Now, every school will have their mission and values on the website for the school, which is pretty much general for across any school that we work with. But do you have something that speaks directly to staff or your future staff? First dot point there is staffing and talent. Things like staff profiles, information about your current employees is available for future staff to see, so they know a little bit about who they might be working with. How do you showcase the diversity within your school? Again, touching on testimonials, can you provide stories from your teachers to prospective staff that speaks to their transition to your school? Again, alleviating some of those fears about starting in a new place. If you're a young teacher going to a school or an early career teacher, you might like to see that there's a number of other early career teachers or young teachers at that school already who can help them with that transition and build that community feel. On the flip side to that, you've got families as well, families moving to your school. Are there other teachers at your school that have families, and can you connect them possibly early on in the process to help make that transition nice and easy? Finally, I just want to finish off with communication, and Tyson said this quite a lot actually right early on. Communication, in our experience, is just so vital and can change someone's entire perspective and experience with you as a school. We've so far discussed all the content and collateral that can be created and shared with candidates, things like that when applying for jobs, at the interview process, when you're doing your advertisements and things like that. But how you communicate with a candidate is probably, in my experience, the most important part of the recruitment process, now more than ever when we're navigating that teacher shortage. Now, lastly, don't be afraid to talk about the challenges of your school. It's something that I speak to candidates about quite often. We obviously try and sell ourselves as best we can, but don't shy away from challenges that you may have. Own them and embrace them. Bring a candidate on a journey with you and make them feel like they're part of the solution. Be transparent around the areas that might not necessarily be going so well and that you want to work on. We find that people that make good long-term hires and successful hires are those that are understanding and ready to be part of that change and growth. Now, as I said, our recruiters have been doing these things for years alongside our schools, and we'll regularly have frank and open conversations with candidates and leadership teams, and then do our best to turn these into opportunities. So that from the get-go, the candidates' expectations are managed, and if they do end up at that particular school, they're prepared and ready to give it their best. So that sort of unpacks that whole slide there, and there's probably a lot more that we can go into on that, and if there's some questions, we can touch on them shortly, but I'll just pop to that next slide for me, please, Tice, and we'll keep going through. So take a little bit of time now to reflect and have a think. As we said, you may already have a lot of these things in place. You may already have basically an employee value proposition in place. It could just be that it's not tangible or really available there at the moment. So think about what you can potentially do in order to create this. Once you've then created your EVP, use it to sell your school, not just the job itself. And that's probably the thing I'd like to leave you with here on that EVP. So with that, I'm going to hand back over to Tyson, who's just going to take you through another few useful tips to help navigate the teacher shortage that we're currently facing.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ryan. If you like the sound of that EVP and you want to learn more, stay tuned at the end. There's things our business is doing which will help make it an easier process to build it and also showcase it. But now we'll get on to some of the other tips. We're getting close to the end now, so I'll try to be as quick as possible. Proactive attraction. I would say being proactive is part of a recruiter's winning formula. Because we do that job 24/7, we're able to be proactive. But how could a school be proactive themselves? I think when we approach recruitment, and what we see schools doing is it's the resignation or the contract leave request or the maternity leave that prompts we need a teacher. There might be a view into what this casual supply teachers look like and whether you could move a supply teacher into a contract. But generally, it prompts an advertisement, and schools quickly go to advertising. Now, that's all very reactive. If you had a proactive element, you might have a following of candidates or a talent pool like a recruiter does that you could notify, that you could engage ahead of jobs coming up. We highly recommend this, and it's something if you haven't already done, you should start to think about how you can do it, because that way, when a job does come up, you'll be able to have two approaches: your reactive advertising, which we'll talk about that in a minute, but also the notifying your candidate following. Social media is great. We're seeing more job ads go up on social media, LinkedIn, even Facebook and Instagram. But one of the best things we find social media for is for campaigns. So if you are thinking of doing some employment campaigns for your school, social media is great. I can tell you that of all the teacher traffic that we're driving to our website, 60% of that comes from either LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. It's pretty powerful from a campaign point of view. So you want to learn more about how you can maximize campaigning, get in touch with us. We can show you exactly what we're doing, and it works. Okay. Moving on to this next one, the old adage, fail to plan, plan to fail. It's something that applies to recruitment. What worked last month when you were recruiting or last year when you were recruiting might not work this time. Look at your advertisements. You might need to change the advertisements. Maybe they're too centered on the job specifics, and you can add a little bit more about your work culture. Understanding the job boards. Job boards, and this is no disrespect to job boards, but they are hit and miss. We use all of them and we celebrate all of them. But sometimes what worked yesterday isn't going to work tomorrow. What worked for an English position might not work for a physics position. And one of the biggest upshots of the pandemic period is we went from maybe a couple of digital job boards to now there's up to 15 that you can use. Some of them are free as well. When you're considering job boards, you need to think about demographics. There's certain job boards like Seek that's been around for so long that is very much something that your 30 and 40s and plus teachers look and use. But what about your 20-something, your graduates? What job boards are they using? Indeed, Jora. There's a lot of job boards that we're finding these younger teachers are using, and that's where we're getting candidates. So when we polled our schools earlier this year, the average school is advertising on 2 to 3 job boards, and you could be advertising on more, and it might not cost you anything because there's quite a few free ones out there. So you got to consider where you want to put your ad, as it might be a real difference maker. And rather than just sort of looking in one space, you can really get that national reach by using more job boards. That's a big thing a recruiter does, national reach, get the movers and shakers applying for your job. Resources, we talked about the EVP. I don't need to go into that anymore. Some other tips on resources is candidate engagement packs. You can combine your EVP and your job description and put them into one candidate engagement pack. Application forms, a lot of schools like application forms. It makes sense. We see some that are very, very, very long, and that can be quite off-putting for candidates. So try not to make them too long. Make sure you've got selection criteria. You know what you're looking for. Don't recruit from a gut feeling. Make sure you have a criteria or an assessment rubric that you and your panel that you assemble when you're interviewing and assessing candidates, you can measure it effectively so it all aligns with what you are looking for based on your strategy and on all of that. Next slide is avoid setting and forgetting. We talked about communication. The amount of candidates who apply for jobs in the first 3 days is high. Now, if you are posting your ads and waiting a month and then not contacting your candidates until you're ready to call in for interview, you've probably found that a lot of the applicants are now telling you they're not available anymore. And we can tell you, if candidates don't hear feedback, they take that as a sign that the school is not interested in. Where most of the time it's just schools are busy places. They've had to put the advertisement up, they've gone back to the core business, and they've set a deadline of 2 weeks later to look at applications. It's no disrespect to the candidates, it's just dealing with the time pressure. But if you can put in some communication aspects during that period, especially between the attraction and the selection stage, you will be able to at least let candidates know application is received. Let them know the timeline. We're going to start interviewing in a week, 2 weeks. At least they know that, and they'll realize, oh, I still have a shot. This school is an opportunity for me. So doing things like that. Of course, right now, the amount of January placements that we're already making, it's amazing. Obviously, a reflection of the teacher shortage that schools are getting started this early. It's great to get started early, but there's a massive gap between people are getting offered and signing contracts and when they're going to start. So if you are getting started early, bear in mind that you've got months before the person's showing up for day one of the job next January. Make sure there's lots of engagement pieces with that candidate all the way through, so you retain them. Some schools might have a lot of events in term 4 to wrap up the school year. Invite your prospective staff to those events. That's a really good way to make them feel like they're already a part of the team. Because with so much competition for people, so many jobs coming up, sadly, there's a lot more, and I know you all have experienced this, and we experience it too. Candidate accepts the job, a week later they pull out, okay? So keep those communication lines and that engagement going. Don't set and forget, be it at the advertising or the appointment stage, keep the comms going. All right, so we're coming to the end now. Schoolhouse recruitment, it's our current biggest service. You can contact myself, Ryan, or any number of our recruiters, depending on what state and locations that you are in. In short, we are doing everything we talked to you about today. And we've got a pool of candidates all measured and appraised. And if you're interested in our service, it's a shoulder tapping. We promote the job to the candidate. We probably already know your location, your school is a match for them. And it makes it a much quicker process for you and the school. And of course, we do all the appraisals and safeguarding and compliance as well. So we take that time and importance and do it for you. This is our last slide before we go to the Q&A. On the left, the QR code is to register a vacancy and get one of our recruiters to do what I just said. But on the right is something we're calling Schoolhouse Plus. If you liked everything we talked about, EVPs, proactively attracting, using more job boards, we hope Schoolhouse Plus will be a game changer for you. In short, come September, you'll be able to trial creating a portal for yourself on our website where you can use our technology to build your employer branding. You can use Schoolhouse Plus to quickly create an EVP, gather testimonials from current staff, add images and videos, and put it all up into an EVP page. It creates your profile that brings your work culture and your environment and everything we talked about to the forefront. Once you publish that, you can download it, make it a resource in your recruitment, but you can also publish it to our website, because come September, October, for the first time in this country, candidates are going to be able to search jobs based on schools. Right now, every job board, you do a job search, location, subject area, and you search jobs. Soon, with us, you're going to be able to see candidates search schools. If I'm based in Melbourne, I'll pick a 45-minute driving distance, and what we hope to see is a number of schools come up where candidates can go through it, look at the EVPs, and they'll be able to start to follow your school. If you're a Schoolhouse Plus customer, you'll gain followers. Our marketers are pushing lots of teachers to our website, and will be even more so when Schoolhouse Plus comes along. Now in your portal, you'll be able to notify your followers about events, jobs that are coming up, a whole bunch of wonderful things to engage your candidate, your talent pools. And then when an ad comes up, you can upload all your recruitment resources, you can design an ad, and you can multi-post through Schoolhouse Plus to all the job boards. The free ones and the paid for ones, you can use our credit facility, which means you're saving on open market advertising and you're consolidating all your accounts payable to one invoice, which I'd like to think will make your business managers happy. You'll also be able to post to your social. So if you have a Facebook page or an Insta or a LinkedIn, you'll be able to auto post any of your engagement pieces in your job straight to your social media platforms. And all simultaneously. And it's all done to make it a very easy process and enable you to do the things that recruiters do, but in a much quicker and easier and cost-effective way. So I've said enough there. If you're interested in being a trial customer, follow the QR code for Schoolhouse Plus free trial, and you'll get on our list, and we'll be in touch with you in early September about setting you up to trial that product. And with that said, we will move across to the question and answer.
All right, we still have time for a couple of questions. Christy, perhaps I'm not sure if any questions have come in on the chat. If someone would like to raise their hand or pop a question in the chat, we can certainly answer that.
I'm just going to make an observation if I can. And I think what we've seen today is, there's a competitive market across Australia. This is not just in Australia. It's New Zealand, it's America, it's Canada, it's everywhere we're working. And the point being is there is technology and resources out there to help you. And you sort of say, oh, I'm so busy, I don't have time to investigate the technology and resources out there to help me. So things like, Schoolhouse Plus, things like Inquiry Tracker, things like Catholic Schools Guide. They're all technology platforms that will enable your school to succeed. And it actually, they're a small time investment at the front for a massive time gain out of it. So I think just give yourself the opportunity to do what, Tyson and Ryan have said today, investigate it, take the opportunity and go for it. A couple of questions. Anyone's got a question? Anyone's got an observation that they want to share? Because we're going to wrap up in the next 4 minutes. So any questions, any thoughts, any observations? Hey, Ryan, I know that this one often appeals to me. I say, every school that I've written a marketing plan for, I say, tell us a little bit about your teachers. Oh, we've got great teachers. We've got the best, most passionate, dedicated teachers at our school. And I say to them, press pause. And I say, I haven't met a school that said they've got terribly unpassionate teachers and not very dedicated teachers. You know what? We've got a bunch of undedicated teachers here who don't give a, really, it's the opposite sounds farcical. So then I say to the school, Ryan, demonstrate that to me. Don't just make the claim without any demonstration. I love your point earlier about profile a staff member every week. Hey, does your staff member have their teacher qualifications on their email signature? 2 little things you could do tomorrow to grab testimonials. I love that point about putting testimonials on your website. In an ad, you're putting out, hey, I'm a science teacher. I've worked at this school for 17 years. This is why I think it's fantastic. Come and join us. I mean, how empowering and uplifting is that, Ryan?
Exactly right. And pretty much all of my friends are still in education. I was the only one that jumped ship out of people that I went to uni with. And I have these conversations with them day in, day out. They love where they are, albeit very, very busy at the moment with everything. But yeah, it's just something that we find it doesn't happen all that often around trying to sell your school with your current staff members.
And I think Robin might have had an observation. Robin, I'm not sure if you wanted to sort of share that in the chat. I think I might have missed it. I may have clicked it off. But Robin had an observation. I know that she's a very experienced educationalist, worked at several schools, and has got a lot of really interesting insights. Robin, I can pop you onto allow to talk if you want to say that.
Otherwise, I can read it. I can see it, Greg, as well.
Go for it. Yeah, please.
So Robin says it's a great overview of how to prepare an EVP. She thinks the biggest challenge is how to get this in front of the passive candidates. So those who aren't actively looking for you, but when they see your EVP, they will want you.
I can probably take this one there, Robin. Thanks for the comment. It's a bit of a self-plug, but this is what recruiters do. This is what we do day in, day out. You know, the proactive side of what I do is probably my favorite part of my job. I've got a number of schools that say to me, Ryan, if you come across a good teacher, I want to know about them. So when I'm having those initial conversations about someone's preferences, when they're just generally inquiring about Schoolhouse and how we can assist their search, I'll say, do you know what? So-and-so school, they are fantastic. They've got the best staff, the grounds are amazing, this, that, and the other, and then sell your school basically at that initial phase. Now, that's obviously the recruiter side of it talking, but in terms of the passive market, that's the challenge really, isn't it? You're 100% correct. It's the challenge that we face about how we get that in front of people. And the answer to that probably goes back to Tyson's point around social media. I would say it's probably the best way to go about it, not the cheapest way by any stretch of the imagination, but gaining followers, understanding, you know, I see a lot of great schools in Melbourne and Sydney in particular. It's where I'm sort of focusing at the moment, who've got enormous followings on their Instagram pages, and they'll do, you know, weekly interviews with staff. They'll follow all of the cultural experiences and sporting experiences that they have on that. Again, that's only people that follow you. So you need to kind of engage people in the first point to get you there. But yeah, the answer to that question is a complex one, but hopefully that gives you a bit of an understanding.
Right, I think also too, just making sure there's presence on your website. So, hey, is there a chapter or a button on your website that speaks to teacher recruitment? And hey, you know, Catholic Schools Guide website, people come to they're checking out your school on our website right now. And do you have a humble line listing on our website, or do you have a beautiful featured page listing on our website that tells the story of what it's such a great place, not only to recruit students, but to recruit staff? So why don't we take that football analogy? Football clubs don't say, gee, I wonder who wants to come and play for us. And they wonder, waiting silently, putting an ad, we need a football star, please come and play for our team, which is an ad in a newspaper, right? Or do they actively go out and try to recruit and attract and say why it's so fantastic to come and work for our club? Look at the shopping that's going on with Alistair Clarkson at the moment, if you're following the AFL. They're all trying to recruit Alistair and show them their wares and their value proposition. We're good at doing it for student recruitment. Apply that same lens as Tyson's talked about us today and Ryan's talked about today for staff recruitment.
I suppose the only thing I would add to that is we've built Schoolhouse Plus to cater to what Robin commented on, that it is a challenge to put your school at the forefront of passive candidates, but with Schoolhouse Plus and the search functionality and our marketing behind it, if you're putting your EVP on your public page on our website, candidates will find you. They will want to work at your school and they can follow you, and you'll be able to build those talents faster. This is one of the key benefits that we hope is going to make a difference.
So that's probably a perfect opportunity, Margaret, to just promote our next session. So if you give us one more minute of your time, everybody, before we sign off. Margaret, back to you for a second.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Tyson and Ryan, for being here today. It's been a jam-packed session, and I know I was trying to take it all in, and I know I certainly haven't. So the great thing is we have recorded this, and we'll be sending you a copy of the recording, so you'll get to watch it again and perhaps take up some of those tips that you might have missed. I certainly love that approach of being much more proactive. I know in the school I was at, we tended to be a bit more reactive in our staff recruitment, and it's certainly not a climate where you can afford to do that. We will also be providing you with a way to contact Schoolhouse. So after this session, in the email that we follow up. Next week, as you know, you're registered for a series of 3 sessions, and next week our Lunch and Learn session is focused on best practice in balancing school fees with pastoral care. So that's an issue that we know is really important for most Catholic schools, and it can actually be a really difficult topic to navigate, you know, with your families and with your school, and make sure the balance is coming out right. So, you know, you will receive an email reminder for that next week, as well as you did for this one. And then finally, we would say, as we mentioned at the beginning, best practice is one of our very important values at Catholic Schools Guide, and we try and translate that in everything that we do. So you know, we'd ask for you today, we do have an offer to make sure that every Catholic school in Australia is featured on our website properly. This is a celebration of Catholic education. It's a place where parents come, and every school should have the opportunity to be telling their story and standing out. So I'd say for today, please go to catholicschoolswebsite.com, so catholicschoolsguide.com.au. Check your school listing. Make sure that you're happy with it. Even if you're a current advertiser, make sure that everything's updated and you're giving the showing your school case in the way that you want to. And if not, then you need to make sure that you contact us so you can ensure you're getting your upgraded listing for your school. But for today, we are going to wish you a very wonderful and productive afternoon. We know you have lots to get back to, and we thank you for your presence today.